Hi everyone. So it's been a wonderful conference so far. Lots of discussions, lots of activities, but it's also starting to be a lot of lots of information, right? Information overdrive. So on the way down, I was walking down here. I thought, how am I going to wake you up today and make you, snap out of this sort of the routine that we're getting into? And I think one thing that hit me is that when I looked at the program, I think I'm one of the only people who's talking about problems. I'm not going to give you a gleeful, beautiful view of what UDL implementation is, and I'm going to highlight some of the tension. I think it's a lot more gritty than we make it at, right? And I'm going to give you a warning, is that we've seen in politics recently in 2016 that sometimes we're so surrounded by people that think like us that we forget that there's people that don't think like us. And I think events like this are real. There's a danger there that we're preaching to the converted, and there's a lot of people who actually have very strong objections to what we do. And this translates into huge strategic issues on our campuses. And that's what I'm going to try and highlight today, all right? Recently, I was at a conference in the US. It's called UDL IRN. It's an international research network, mostly working on K-12, on the secondary, primary and secondary schools. But they also invite higher education, researchers and professors. And there was a guy there that had, unfortunately I've forgotten his name, but he had a wonderful presentation. He only had one slide up. And it was a picture of base camp in the Himalayas. And he left us there for 5 minutes watching this thing. And I was like, why? And he said, that's exactly where we are, right? It's so great, and we made it to base camp. But look at how much more you've got to do. And I think that's where we are as a sector. And it's slightly scary, because we can get very comfortable, right? And so maybe I'm going to stir the pot a little bit today. I'm going to talk about a little bit of research we've done, but I'm going to use it mostly anecdotally to make you think about how much more do we have to do, what kind of strategic alliances do we do, how do we change culture, how do we change our campuses. And I think it's actually a lot tougher than we make it out to be. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about myself. Normally I wouldn't do this in 25 minutes, but I think it's pertinent to what I'm trying to do. Because my perspective is maybe unique. Maybe that's why I'm a bit sort of disillusioned. I'm not disillusioned, by the way. I'm a great advocate of UDL, but I feel tired sometimes. I feel, whoa, it's a big struggle. Okay? I've been at this for about 7 and 8 years, and there are things that keep hitting you back in the face, and I think we have to be wary of how tough it can be. So I'm actually from the K-12, so I'm a high school teacher originally. I was a teacher for 14 years. Worked specifically in social emotional behavior difficulties. That's really my area of research and my area of practice. I was principal of a school for 7 years, of an SCBD school. And then when I started my PhD, I decided I still wanted to carry on working, but I left the classroom and I became the head of an accessibility service on a campus in Canada at McGill. So a fairly large campus, to give you an idea, 40,000 students, 3,600 staff. And when I walked in 2011, they said, your job is to implement UDL on campus. Right, so I did that for 4 years. I left that in 2015, wiping egg off my face. And then I went into a faculty of education in Eastern Canada, UPI. So it's interesting today because whatever side I find myself in, people say, oh, you don't understand us, right? And that's something you've got to think about today. When I was in accessibility, people said, you want to be a professor, you don't understand us. Now I'm assistant prof, and people say, oh, you come from disability, you don't understand us. And so that's what we're faced with. And I think that's what I like to highlight mostly through this, the anecdote of the research that we carried out, is that there's a lot of dichotomy, there's huge gaps, and we need to bridge those gaps, and it's not easy. And there's lots of reasons we could talk, at a time about it, but mostly because we have different training. We very rarely actually are working in an interdisciplinary way. We should have interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary teams, but we rarely do, right? I'm looking forward to the day when we have professors working with accessibility services towards a UDL, right? Also, we've got to be careful of this notion that everyone in accessibility and disability service provision is pro-UDL. The strongest opponents of UDL I have encountered have been in accessibility services. Why? Because it's threatening, right? I did a presentation once which was working yourself out of a job. And that's how a lot of people in disability actually see it. So you need to address that too. So you've got all these tensions from different sides. I'm going to try and get you moving a little bit. So to try and gauge the room, see people's perceptions, and as you raise your hand or raise something else or make some noise, look around you and look at who agrees with the statement. So I picked 4 random statements just to get you reacting a little bit. So I'm going to read them out. There's 4, and then raise your hand and make some noise or wave something if you agree, okay? The first one is faculties of education are receptive to UDL and already embrace the framework. Anyone agree with that? That's even less than I thought. Well, okay. So you do realize the problem, right? Faculties of education should be allies in this, and they're not allies in this. And we can discuss in the question time. I hope I leave enough time for questions. We can discuss some of the ways this actually manifests itself. Second one, faculty of education have heard of UDL. Who agrees with that? Not even. I think you're right. There's a lot of them that have never heard of UDL. I was at a faculty council very recently, and about 7-8 staff said, could you actually tell us what it is? Okay. These are tenured professors. Faculty of education promote UDL on their campuses. Anyone agree with that? No. And what a pity, right? That's what I'm going to talk to you about in the stakes. They should be the prime ambassadors of this on our campuses, and they're not, right? So we have a lot of work to do there as well. And the last one, faculties of education are fearful of UDL. Who agrees with that? At least there's some. Well, you'll have to make up your own mind, but certainly, you know, we've probably all observed and experienced some of these, right? So what are we going to do today? Just, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about a study which we did on our campus. Small study, but I'm going to use that as an excuse really to get you into some deeper thinking about some of the stakes, some of the things we have to think of as we approach this. Okay? And hopefully I'll leave enough time for questions. I'd like this to be really, really interactive. So what about the format? You might think, why is this guy putting a format slide on this? Well, again, we are asking professors to change the way they teach. And yet we get on a stage and we do presentations exactly the way we've done it for decades without thinking of UDL. So AHEAD asked us to think about engagement when we came up here. So I want to take some time with you to think about my own reflection and what I went through to actually think, well, what can I do to break this? Because again, it's sage on the stage, it's unimodal, we have representation only in one way. So what can we do to begin this reflection? Because it is a little bit hypocritical that sometimes, we'll say you need to change, but then we don't necessarily change the way we do things as well. And just as easy it is for us to come up here and say, well, we don't have time, I have 25 minutes, we have to just get on with it. That's the way professors feel. And that's why it's so challenging what you're asking them to do too. So what did I try to do? Multiple means of representation. This is the hardest, right? I'm on a stage and I'm doing this like this. So yesterday I tried to put my slides on, on SlideShare. They're on the Twitter as well if you need them. Something I do a lot is I use MoveNote. Are any of you familiar with MoveNote? So I pre-recorded a session at home, in my house on Prince Edward Island. About 4 nights ago, I actually went through it, and you can load up your slides and you can load up your video. It's about, in Canada it's about $5. It's fairly easy, fairly affordable. So if you click on it, you will have actually the full same delivery as this session. You'll probably have different points. I might expand on different things, cut some out. This is something I would do in lectures, right? Because I realize that obviously a lot of students will not engage with what I'm saying. Maybe I'm getting monotonous, maybe I'm going too fast. But they have a backup, right? I'm not necessarily going to record a 3-hour lecture, but I'll probably do a half an hour sort of recap of things that are important. Multiple action and expression. Obviously, I've tried to use the Twitter feed. I've been monitoring up to now. I've been engaging with some of you. I'll engage with you again afterwards. So this is something that I'd like to create a conversation with. I'm also doing discussions table 1 around 12 on how to involve faculty. So hopefully, if some of you want to carry that conversation on, we can carry that conversation on. Multiple means of engagement. Again, they overlap a little bit. I'd use the Twitter feed. If some of you are interested as well in the paper and in continuing this conversation, in carrying on comparative work, whatever, this is something that this kind of event can actually give rise to as an emergence of practice. So we need to also break this model of professional development. I'm really glad that AHEAD is actually starting the discussion tables. There's lots of things happening like ed camps and things that are actually making us rethink about professional development. It's not about being passive and sitting there. It's not about taking knowledge and professional development as a sort of commodity that you're giving people. It's about bringing UDL into our modes of practice as practitioners as well. So anyway, that was a parenthesis. We'll move on to something else. So this little study I'm going to talk to you about. So we did a small study it's a phenomenological study. It looked at the perceptions of students And we wanted to, obviously, I was pretty worried about, making my colleagues feel threatened. So it wasn't about saying, what is it that you're not getting in your graduate course? This was looking at the master's courses that we run, and we have 5 master's courses, 4 are online, and 1 is face-to-face, okay? And the point was to try and get some feedback from students. We're all talking about student feedback, getting the perceptions of students, so we wanted to do something phenomenological. But obviously, I didn't want to worry my colleagues either in saying, we're going to assess how you're doing and whether you're being UDL. So from the start, it was actually very clearly about perceptions and expectations. And actually, we opened it up to students who were registered but hadn't started courses. We were interested in saying, as I go into a graduate course in education, what is it that I'd like to have there? And we were hoping that by reflection afterwards, practitioners on the program would be able to say, oh, actually, do we do that? Do we not do that? You'll see that, in fact, they have actually highlighted some of the friction that they see already happening, right? But that wasn't necessarily the intention when we started off. The ethics might be of interest to you. Obviously, I'm a teacher in that faculty too. I'm academic lead on one of the master's programs, so we wanted to actually get some authentic feedback from students. So we went some way to try and really disengage. I saw the raw data when it was anonymized, transcribed, and everything else, and I had nothing to do with the project. So we had a team of graduate students run the project themselves. They were recruiting participants, doing the interviews, doing the transcription and all that. So we disconnected ourselves from that to try and get as much of authentic feedback from them as we could. So in terms of feedback, I've tried to regroup it in the 3 principles, but obviously you realize that when you're talking to students, they don't necessarily make this artificial distinction, right? And a lot of things that they do say would fall back on the different UDL principles depending on how you see it. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but things that I mentioned, for example, were resources, links to articles that actually don't work, right? So spending hours and hours actually to trace some of the resources the professor's talking about because it seems accessible, it seems it's linked to, but it's not. They also mention sometimes even not having access to the resources through the university library because sometimes it's a journal that we don't even subscribe to, it's something that we don't have access to. So fairly basic stuff, but actually missing. More a move away from the PDF, right? I said this now, it's all about read the PDF and give me a response. Read the PDF, give me a response. This kind of routine sort of exercise within faculties of education graduate program. They would like to see more audio, particularly in resources, academic content. So not just YouTube videos and things like this, but actually have audio and video of some of the research, some audio files or some of the readings that they would have to do. And they mention this explicitly in things that they would have. Video footage in terms of reinforcement. So this would be a little bit of what I've just talked to you about MoveNote. They would like to see 15, 20-minute recaps on crucial points in video format. We have portals. Most of you have a learning management system underused, and they're saying, well, we have this. Why can't the instructor have a YouTube channel and just actually give me a bit of, of recap? I might not be there, I might be in hospital, I might have reasons why I can't attend a lecture. I would like to keep up. I'd actually like to remain engaged in my course. If I had the minimum, I would be able to do that. And then examples of technology that widens inclusion. You realize the irony. These are courses in inclusion where they're saying, well, we're not actually using technology at all. So we'll have to actually have a prof talking about technology that assists inclusion, but throughout a 12-week course, we're not using technology at all. Sometimes we're not even using the learning management system. In terms of action expression, these are all sort of quotes. It's only a snapshot, obviously. It's a study that's come up with a lot of qualitative data, but I wanted to give you sort of illustrations. Excessive use of what they call read and write to respond. So again, that PDF thing. So really they have the feeling that they go into those courses, it's all about reflection supposedly, but really all it is read this and give me a response, read this, give me a response. Avoid compulsory rote use of presentation and group work. So it's interesting because we just talked about group work now. They identify group work and presentations as this quick alternative. We've told people to diversify and differentiate the instruction. So they said a majority of profs have gone on to group work and presentation. They don't think about it. There's no flexibility. It doesn't suit everyone, and it creates barriers for a lot of students, but that's what most of the instructors are moving to. Would like to be able to submit videos, animation, e-portfolios as assignments. It's not that hard to do. I actually do this in my courses now, but to say, in your rubrics, literally say, if it's not writing that you're actually assessing, to say, literally have a paragraph in there that I keep in all of my assignments that says you can produce this in the form of a podcast, a video, an animation, whatever, a PowerPoint presentation, whatever you want, and your rubric kind of slides into what you want. Animation I added because I had students who came to me and said, could I actually do an animation? I don't want a video, I want to do animation. I said, yeah, why not? You'd be surprised. A fair percentage of classrooms now actually give you assignments in animation form. And it's a remarkable work. They put so much work into it. They put far more work, sometimes probably twice the amount of work than they would do in actually doing a written assessment. And it often talks to, as well, to their peers and demonstrates things in a much more significant way, much more has much more impact. Hybrid presence on all courses. As I said to you, we have 4 online courses, fully online cohorts of masters. We have 1 which is face-to-face. And the indication on both sides were like, well, even if I'm face-to-face, I'd like some online digital interaction. And then vice versa. If I'm online, I would still like to have the occasional meeting, the occasional seminar, the occasional opportunity to actually meet face-to-face and actually interact in a different way, have different types of representation and action and expression. Engagement. Would like the relevant professional experience, so knowledge and use and learning experience. These are all teachers who have been in the field for quite some time. They're arriving in class and they said, really, as far as they're concerned, the course outline is already formatted. They have no say in it. And it talks to them as if they were, full beginners in the subject, whereas really they are professionals coming in to get further knowledge. And that seems to not be actually used. Activities, assessment material that is not real world. Theoretical, conceptual, disconnected from examples that are right there. You just ask them what did they do today and they'd be able to bring that into the classroom. And then they would learn, this is interesting, they would like the learner identity, learning preferences and diversity, and knowledge integrated into the class. A student said, how ironic is it that I have a neurocognitive impairment, I'm sitting in the class, I am outing myself, and it's the elephant in the room. Professor on inclusion refuses to talk about it and to integrate it into the format. So I've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to go fairly quickly. But obviously they acknowledge a lot of friction, and I'll let you go through this. But the major friction is the one I haven't colored up there. Clear disconnects with regards to the discourse on differentiation, inclusion, UDL, and the practices that you see in the classroom, right? Since you have access to the PowerPoint on Twitter, I won't go through the friction on each of the points. It repeats a lot of the finding, but it makes the friction clearer. I'd like to jump straight to the danger. Obviously, why is it dangerous? And I'll go straight into the stakes. So first of all, one point I haven't got up there is that all of these people are going back to teach in the secondary sector. They are supposed to be spreading the word on UDL within the secondary sector, and they're not because we're not actually modeling it. And they're saying as they're coming in, I would like to see this model. But it goes further than that, and it has impact for us as well within higher education. So faculties of education are often looked on campus as the natural advocates for UDL. They know about diversity, they know about education, they know about inclusion, so why are they not talking about UDL? When I worked at McGill, it was a huge issue that as an accessibility service, we were trying to promote this, and people would say, well, hang on, they're there, they work in education, they're not pushing us to change our assessment method and our delivery methods, so why is there such a dichotomy between both messages? So we need to create alliances there and to have a uniform dialogue between both the faculties and accessibility services. There can be quite a lot of rivalry between faculties of education and accessibility services. So we need to get over that because otherwise it creates silos and this territoriality where one is looking for more visibility than the others, and it creates this sort of struggle, power struggle on campuses where who's right and who's pushing an agenda forward. There's also, I don't know about the European context, but in North America, a lot of people who work within faculty of education move on to do faculty development on your campuses. So if you're not addressing and getting UDL into the faculty of education agenda, you're not getting into faculty development either. For us, these are usually professors on sort of sabbatical that are rotating into these positions. So we end up having an absence of UDL discourse there as well. And the last one as well, we're finding, certainly on our campus, but I think it's a wide reality in North America, that people who graduate from my campuses often stay on campuses and then have key roles within student services, all sorts of positions. So if we don't actually train them explicitly on UDL, we don't make this part of the everyday dialogue, they go on to key positions on campuses, and they're not equipped, they don't have the tools to actually continue this agenda and continue the rollout of the implementation. I just wanted to also address the 2 North American resources that might be useful to you. So I don't know if you know that one. It's a fully accessible online, edited, free edited on every 3-4 months basis. Higher education promoting practices. It comes from Washington, the Do It Center in Washington. And then CAS obviously now has a UDL site for higher education, which gets upgraded. You get lots of examples put up there. So it's a useful tool, certainly when you're trying to talk to faculties of education, trying to promote the message on campuses. So that's just to acknowledge the fact we were funded for this. I want to talk to you a little about this as well. So I come from UPI, and we're actually having a conference on UDL in June. So the call for submission is open, and the registration is open as well. And we hope to hopefully see some of you there as well to continue some of his discourse. There's not that many conferences on UDL around the world, so it's a matter of grabbing them when they're there. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but I was hoping there'd be a bit of interaction. No? Yes?
Hi, I'm Jo Rushworth from De Montfort University in Leicester. Ideally then, whose responsibility is it, in your opinion, or who should be taking the lead on promoting UDL in the institution? Should it be disability team? Should it be professional services? Should it be at the education faculty? Or should it actually be, how to put it, regular lecturers, members of staff, people just everybody doing the teaching?
It's an excellent question. I think this is the kind of subtext I'd like to raise with this kind of project, is that we are still working in silos in terms of implementation. And then the problem is that if someone, whichever stakeholder it is, grabs hold of this and takes ownership, it's like, throwing the ball. Right, you have it, I don't have to do it. And I think, as you say, it doesn't work that way, because eventually, whether it's accessibility, as it often is, whether it's a faculty of education, whether it's a community of practice, starting from the ground up, eventually you hit a ceiling where you can't do anymore, because the rest are actually strategic, sort of implementation methods that require some sort of planning, some sort of nurturing, resources. You need administration behind you, not necessarily top down, but actually feeding this process so that you can move to systemic implementation. I think the danger is if we do what we do, which is best practices, it can remain little knots, little islands and niches of best UDL practices, but then it doesn't go beyond. I think from what we were saying yesterday, you're fairly lucky in a sense that someone at some point in your institution said it needs to happen, make it happen, right? And because you have to switch thinking at that time. It switches from just being, this is what I do and I'm modeling, to looking at the sort of hurdles. In the end, it's a management of change problem. It's not just about, I think the danger in conferences like this is we are trying to show that there's a philosophical and social benefit in doing this. Well, of course, no one's going to disagree with that. But pro-social choice is an interesting phenomenon. We don't necessarily do good things because we know that they're good. You need some sort of incentive. You need some planning. You need some organizational structure to make it happen. And I think we're not seeing this at the moment. I've yet to see a campus where it's been planned out in a sustainable, systemic way. And that's not maybe our problem, because most of us are either accessibility, faculty. It's actually an administrative, it's a management problem. You've got to look at management of change and actually plan it, address the resistance, nurture it, and monitor it. And I'm not sure we're doing this at the moment. Okay? Okay.